Christianity in West Africa with Byron Washington. Yeah, what's going on, party people? The place to be. I go by the name of the BK Apologist, transmitting all the way live. New York is the city, Brooklyn is the borough. What's good? What's popping? Happy Saturday to each and every one. Of course, we gotta say what's up to the party people in the chat. We got Tyler Lott on the check-in. We got the illustrious, indelible, incredible Natu D2 check-in. The king of all mods. You know what I mean? And of course, if you haven't yet already, please like, share, and subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend to tell 4 more friends that's going down right now. And if you like how it goes down over here, you can show your appreciation via PayPal. Or if you'd like to be a monthly supporter of BK, you can become a patron where you get an assortment of goodies to enhance your personal Bible study. And today we have a good friend of mine's, first time on the channel. A good dude. He's the actual real certified boogeyman. There's been other people and other channels that have been claiming that title, but it's really my man right here. Of course, I'm talking about Byron Washington. What's going on, B?
What's going on, BK, man? Appreciate being on the channel officially, man. Longtime supporter, brother in Christ, brother in the faith, man. I'm just happy to be here.
I'm happy for you to be here as well. And we have a special presentation. This is something that is a passion project for Mr. Washington. And I was wondering before we get into it, like how did you focus on this, and why did you do this presentation for? It's not just for YouTube. So
Yeah. So, well, one, it was always like an inkling in me of just being a student of just African history and just seeing how everywhere else in Africa everything traveled except for Christianity, right? And it's like that didn't make sense. And as I was studying, getting my second master's, I had already earned my licentiate in sacred theology, and I was getting my MDiv. Um, one of my thesis was about North African Christianity and it being one of the foundations of Western Christianity, period. And it kept leading me into these nuggets about the travelings from west and northeast northeastern Christianity into the West. And then, of course, we had other scholars, in the UA, shout out to Dr. Benz Bantu, kind of dropping bombs on people over the last few years. And so now it's just, it led me into more of this passion project. And I end up presenting it as like a second presentation for my master's thesis. And long story short, they were like, yeah, we got to find a way to make this some type of curriculum or normal teaching, because people just don't know this information as an option to learn.
I'm over here talking. Forgot I was muted. No, it's super important, especially for what we do as urban apologists. This kind of information helps dispel the myths of, the white man's religion and how Christianity was beaten into us, during the transatlantic slave trade. So this really just completely obliterates all those arguments, right? And it still doesn't mean that you should be a Christian, right? But it does mean that if you are against Christianity, you're not going to be able to use this particular critique anymore after you see what Byron does. All right. So, with that being said, let's get to it. All right. Christianity in West Africa by the humble scholar. And I don't know if you peeped the humble brag, right? Because he's like, yeah, my second master's, I'm like, this guy right here. But so let's get into it. So get Byron.
Yeah, so our agenda here this evening, there's going to be a lot of information being thrown at you. I implore everybody to rewatch the show, take your time, take some screenshots because it's a lot of information. There's a lot more information, but the agenda for this evening is going to be, the introduction. That's kind of what we just started, building some confidence. So we're gonna just talk about like the background up until we get into West Africa. We want to engage the audience, of course, and we're gonna have some visual aids to kind of talk about um, the ideas towards the end about where areas are we particularly looking into, and then BK and I will talk about some final tips and takeaways, like what does this mean moving forward within the UA community, or just people who just students of history.
Cool. All right. So Christianity and West Central Africa. All right.
So we are what we're not stating here, because a lot of times in these conversations, the first thing people want to try to put words in your mouth is and state something totally different. Right now, we're just doing a basic, a very modest claim. And so you see, as you can see on the screen, what we're not stating is Christianity was the or dominant religion in West Africa prior to colonialism. Not saying that at all. We're not saying what specific type of expression it was outside of his original theological bounds. And that's a big one, because people often want to say, like, what exactly did it look like, or how did they do this and how did they do that? That can be a different conversation from a different area, different show, different book, but that's not what we're stating here, right? Outside of, again, its original theological boundaries. And we're not stating who or what person was the leaders. So oftentimes in most places in Christianity, you're going to see leaders, big figures, from different regions and stuff like that. We're not going to be able to do that on this show, and we'll talk a little bit as to why that is the case. And then lastly, because this always comes up when you talk about Africa, right, is what was the color or shade of all the different types of Africans. And we say that because, we often want to talk about Africa being this the most diverse continent, and having all these different things, how big as Africa is, being a motherland. But often we want to just make Africa look one way, when we know that it's many different types of people with different phenotypes, shades of skin, uh, uh, hair types, everything like that, all indigenous to the continent of Africa. So
Right.
here, we're not doing the shade tree game here. We're not doing that.
And if I can add to the list of what we are not stating, we are not stating that Jesus existed. We're not stating that.
Okay.
We're not stating that, the inerrancy of scripture. We're not talking about that, right? We're not talking about whether or not African or African Americans should be Christians. We're not saying that either. Okay. And it's really important that you understand that, because what me and B are going to do afterwards, we're going to do a follow up show. And that whole follow up show is going to be dealing with people in the comment section who have a hard time listening. And if you say something that we did not say in this presentation, we're going to make you famous. Because for some reason, people have a hard time listening. So that the whole thing will be us just screenshotting your comment and saying, see, this person did not listen because this is what we're stating, and now they're stating something else.
Bingo.
All right.
Bingo.
So,
So what we are stating, right? Christianity existed in pre-colonial West Africa, right? So this is a modest claim that we're stating, is that we're not even stating something like prior to even European contact. At least we aren't, right? You may see some of our sources state otherwise, but this is what we're stating: pre-colonial, so pre-Portuguese, right? Um, it was significant enough to be documented by Arabs and Europeans. So we're not talking about how large or how small, but we're all saying that it's significant enough that Arab Muslims and then Europeans later noted on a significant enough scale that we still have evidence to this day that, hey, this existed. Um, We are saying that other Africans kept the narratives, their oral history. So if you are a pro-black or pro-African or just a student of history, you have to take oral histories of different peoples into consideration. You can't just throw it away because it wasn't written down in some type of way. Um, Artifacts, we're going to talk about artifacts that seem to coincide with the given data, and then we're going to talk about how Africans mission evangelize to other Africans. So basically what the Great Commission is telling us to do.
Right, right, right. So the gospel in West Africa.
So the Gospel of West Africa, I want to talk about, as you see 4 or 5 different bullet points here. There's a thing called the Nigerian knot. There's kingdoms. There's actual kingdoms talked about. Oral traditions. Prester John, that's going to be an interesting one when we get to there, and the archaeological accounts. So just keep in mind, I even talk about just briefly the Nigerian knot real quick. And all it's simply stating is that there's if you look up Nigerian knot, it's normally associated with northern Nigeria, but a lot of people, scholars have noted that it's come out of the Berber tradition, the North African tradition, into West Africa, and it is a derivation of them trying to create the cross. So the Nigerian knot has a lot of Christian influence into what we have today. And so when you want to know like what's a West African ancient cross you can look at, maybe look at like the Nigerian knot as a fixture, which I actually I actually wear it sometimes too. So
Cool. All right. Key terms.
key terms here. Please pay attention. Tropical, savanna, and Sudan. I can't state that enough because what you're going to see is oftentimes these writers are using these 3 terminologies to describe what they mean in what we know today as West Africa. So tropical, savanna, and Sudan, and we're going to do our best to try to define some of these terms in a second, so you can get an understanding.
All right. Uh, I'll read this.
Yeah,
The African savanna biome, is that how you say it?
biome.
Biome is a tropical grassland in Africa between latitude 15 degrees north and 30 degrees south and longitude 15 degrees west and 40 degrees west. It covers, what's that? Oh my gosh.
Guinea.
Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Togo, Benin, Nigeria, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Sudan, Ethiopia, Somalia, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Angola, Uganda, Rwanda, the Burundi, Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Botswana, and South Africa. Okay, that's a lot.
So now, as you just stated, so you can see in your mind, but get a picture of when we say Savannah, this is the area we're talking. We're not just talking about the coast. It's within the interior of Africa.
Right. The area known as the Western Sudan encompasses the broad expanse of savanna that stretches between the vast Sahara Desert to the north and the tropical rainforest of, why I keep messing up this word? It's Guinea?
Yes, sir. Guinea.
Oh, gosh. Coast to the south. Its name comes from Balad al Sudan, or land of blacks, the term used by the Arabic travelers, geographers, and historians who first wrote of the region's history. The medieval empire of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai that controlled the Western Sudan had no fixed geopolitical boundaries or singular ethnic or national identities.
So that's important. That last statement is so you get an idea of like the some of the empires that was going on at the time. But keep in mind, because some people may ask you, okay, so which African were they? Were they Were they Yoruba? Were they Igbo? Were they Mandi? Were they there was no fixed national identity or singular one. There were all these different ethnic groups that made up these different kingdoms.
All right. The Kingdom of Aksum.
So the Kingdom Aksum is important because I want to lay the groundwork, because this is probably the one of the most known kingdoms that we know today within the within Christian history, we call the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. It is the oldest and largest sub-Saharan African church that we see today. You know, and it's always the most mystery that everybody wants to say. It seems like everybody wants to stake some type of claim into, like, yeah, you know, you guys aren't the Ethiopians, et cetera, et cetera. Well, we're going to kind of talk about what this means and what it doesn't mean. But it existed. The Kingdom of Exum was modern day Ethiopian Eritrea. It's part of the Great Lakes tradition. So you know, you have different things in Africa. You have like the Nile Valley tradition, you have the North African tradition, or the Maghreb, you have the Sahel, you have the West African tradition, and this is the Great Lakes tradition. Where the Great Lakes within more the central eastern part of Africa. As we stated, the oldest independent sub-Saharan African church. It was said that part of it was where the legend of Prester John was, and emphasis on legend, because we'll talk about what that actually means. And this is some important points here. So Ethiopian reports of missions enter into the eastern side of the Kingdom of Congo, and you see here at the bottom the source for that: Ethiopian Congo, a tale of two medieval kingdoms. And so during this time frame, you know, we often hear about the Congo of their first contact with Christianity being the Portuguese. Well, in actuality, in within the Ethiopian tradition, they actually carry this kind of history of they were in contact with that other medieval kingdom, because they were two very large, powerful medieval kingdoms, the Congo and Aksumite Empire at that time. And so they actually had some missions going back and forth. And we're still trying to discover more of those, because it's harder to get just that information into not only the US but in English, because it's these in these different languages.
Okay. This is from
So
early
yeah. Oh no, go
Christianity.
ahead, GK. Go ahead. You got it.
Early Christianity in Africa, North Africa, the Sahara, the Sudan, Central and East Africa, a contribution to ethnohistory by Ludwig Brandl, page 486 on Ethiopia. So you want me to,
So
yeah, want
no,
me
I
to
can
say
read
it,
it.
or I get
No,
it?
I can read it. I can read it. No problem. So it says about the year 525, at the time of the Jewish king Naus, Christian refugees from Yemen reached the Sudan. Nawas persecuted the Christians of his kingdom, and King Caleb of Ethiopia was asked by Emperor Justinian to attack the pro-Persian Nawas. Comas, a traveler to India, saw with his own eyes how Caleb organized an expedition against Yemen. After the campaign was finished, Abraha was appointed governor of Yemen, but after a period of 2 years, he made himself independent. And then as we fast forward a little bit more, it says in earlier times, in the regions of central Bornu and Kanam on Lake Chad were already established destination points of many migrants and Christians, as the Kisara legend tells us. And we'll talk about that legend in a little bit. The Bornu tradition has it that the Oba Wadala were former Christians. The Wandala or Mandara came from the Fazan. The Beulah, who were under the first king, are said to have come from the Red Sea to Lake Fitri, Fitri via the Kofadan, who Christians as well. Today, the Beulah people live in northwest of Yola in Nigeria. So what is this segment saying? It's a large segment. I kind of broke it up. When you in the source material, you can read it for yourself. It's detailing not only the history of the Ethiopian tradition, but it also shows how they, even then, there were evidences of people from the Aksumite Empire traveling westward into the Chadic, into the Niger Congo River Valley regions. So based off of their evidences, what they're saying is that even the Ethiopian tradition has evidence of traveling into what we would call West Africa today as
Hmm.
Christians, as you can see.
Hmm.
So I want to state this: this is not comprehensive. More work needs to be done, but it is enough data for us to show a solid conclusion. So, and this comes directly from the book you see at the bottom, The Catholic Church in Tropical Africa, 1445 to 1850 by Joseph Kinney, and chapter 5 from the Gospel Across the Sahara and from Nubia. And this is important. Christian influence in the northern savanna areas of tropical Africa, as we stated before, is even older than Portuguese influence. So I want to say that again. Christian influence in the northern savanna of tropical Africa is even older than Portuguese influence. It came from three sources: early North African Christianity, two, medieval Nubia, and then three, European Christians who crossed the desert beginning in the 17th century. And the reason why we started with the Ethiopian context, because at the time of this book, some of the information about what was going on from Ethiopia into West Africa didn't exist. So more than likely, this book was to go and reprint again. They would include that information to say, hey, that bullet point 3 probably would move to bullet point 4, and the third bullet point would be the Ethiopians as well. BK, anything you want to add or talk about with this?
No, this is great. This is great.
Okay. So here what do the experts have to say? So evidence of archaeology and Christian symbols in early North African Christianity penetrated the nomadic Berbers very extensively. This is coming from the same book we just referenced. Even if it's not always deeply and after the Muslim conquest, many of the Christians took refuge in the desert. As a result, Tasmashek's vocabulary still contains Christian terminology. For instance, the word for angel. The Andes cross, similar crosses from other Tuareg towns are likely of original Christian inspiration. The northern knot of Nigeria, as I stated earlier, in its various styles, fits clearly into this cross series. Its depiction on the floor of the ruin of St. Augustine's Cathedral in Hippo, which is in Algeria today, now removed Tapava, demonstrates this. And so if you get the book, they actually have a picture of that cathedral that existed in North Africa, and it's literally just like the North African knot. And actually, when I go back on the screen later, I'll show you. I actually have one that I just crosses on. It's also often called a Berber cross. That, again, with this has a Christian inspiration with it as well too. And these people that you see, the Tasmac vocabulary, that's typically a Berber or Imagine vocabulary, and the Tuareg people are one of the Berber clans that we'll be talking about from North Africa. So, unlike mountainous and insular Ethiopia, which confined Christian evangelization, to the limits of imperial expansion, Nubia spread its influence over the savanna plains to the west. Ruins of churches and monasteries are found in Darfur and the Chad Ghazal region. Ruins of burnt brick construction of the Nubian inspiration are found as far as Bornu. The Nubian Forme cross found its way to Bornu, and as far as Benin City before the Portuguese arrived. So if you ever have a chance, Darfur, Chad, Bornu, Benin, these are all considered West African areas to this day. And what this is saying is that the Nubians had already crossed over with their influence into that part of West Africa before the Portuguese arrived. I'm probably gonna mispronounce this, but they'll be okay. João de Barros, describing the time of discovery, says that when a new king acceds in Benin, an eastern king called Ogane sends him emblems of authority, including a brass cross to be worn around the neck, similar to that worn by the knights in the Order of St. John. A similar but smaller cross was given to the Benin ambassador, which he wore around his neck and which gave him certain privileges while in Ogane's kingdom. The messenger with this cross is always depicted at the bottom of the carved elephant tusk of Benin, as displayed in the Lagos and Benin museums. So yes, if you go to those museums, you will see evidence of this, all prior to Portuguese interaction. The connection between Nubia and Benin can be filled out by writers such as Leo Africanus, who's writing about his travels around 1512 to 1514, said that the Gagal people, somewhere in the Chad Darfur region, highlight here, practiced Christianity, and that the founder of the Mandara kingdom around the Mawari in Cameroon was a Christian. The same assertion is found in the Mandara Chronicle, and Denham heard some Mandaris referred to as Christians even in 1823. And so I want to pause here for a second because I think this is important when we're talking about time frames and certain people here. So Leo Africanus is often a figure that people talk about when it comes to what Africa looked like. And recently, there's been scrutiny around Leo Africanus. I don't know why, stating that maybe he didn't go to the regions in all of Africa that he claimed and that he made things up, right? Because he actually would state that in parts of West Africa he went to, it was Christianity. The reason that it was skeptical of Leo Africanus during that time is that honestly, and scholars will tell you this, they didn't believe him because they didn't think that West Africans, when the Europeans got this information from him, were that advanced. Simply put, they thought that he was making the story up. So A, it was impossible for him to visit all these regions, and B, that these regions were so advanced, there's no way that these were actually real, that he was fantasizing, which we know, in fact, that he was telling the truth now that, yeah, these regions in within West Africa were very much so civilized and advanced. And then again, as you see here, as far early as 1823, because it's important to know that when we talk about the tropical savanna, Sudanic regions of West Africa, many the colonialists didn't really get into the interior of West Africa until sometime in the late 17th to even early 1800s. That's when you start to get these accounts. So prior to contrary belief, they were not in the interiors; they were just held to the coast of West Africa for a very long time. BK, anything you want to add to it?
Nah, man, you cooking. You
Oh,
cooking.
good. Oh, good, man. So this is fun. The only tradition surviving is that of the Kasar migration from Egypt to the Sudan, Nubia, and then west to the Benue and Niger River valleys. Some authors would like to see the Kasara migration as one of Nubians, but this is disputed. And I want to pause here to say this, and we'll see this. Well, actually, you know what? I'll finish reading this and then I'll explain later in a second. Further up the Benue, the Bata and Chaba or Bachama peoples also hold to a Kasara legend and claim that they originate from the Sotuku or Gobar people. The validity of this claim has likewise been challenged. Even so, a similar claim was made for the Gobar people by, and I'm going to butcher this name, so you apologize, Abdalkokar ibn al-Mufa in his Ratat al-Afar, written in 1824 to 1825, that they originated from the Copts of Egypt. It matters little whether these legends are historically true or not. They only serve to confirm the penetration of Christian cultural influence from Nubia into the northeastern Nigeria and along the Benue Tiger, I'm sorry, Benue Niger to Benin. So it's important here for us to talk about honestly in academics, right? Often you hear people talk about try to speak in absolutes and no scholar says this and no scholar says that. Well, here in this in textbooks that we have and things that we're talking about is that we see scholars admitting that, hey, not every single one agrees with us on this data, but because there's so much data about it from different sources, it serves as a confirmation to show, hey, there's some type of significant penetration that's going on, that while all these different legends and accounts from people groups in different regions of West Africa kind of having this similar origin stories, something is going out, like something's going on here. And the conclusions that the scholars are saying is, with the last highlighted statement that you see, is that they only serve to confirm the penetration of Christian cultural influence. So you see now they're admitting that there's dispute, but the fact that there's so much of this evidence out there, something of significance is going on.
Right. So whether or not there's a direct genetic connection, there's a definite folklore connection. Right. The information is coming from somewhere.
Right.
So Right.
Right. And we see this, and we see this today, BK. Like, if something happens, and people are like, well, I don't know the exact reason or the exact statement of what has happened, but you have 10 to 12 people having similar accounts. Like, that means, something was going on to where people have this shared experience. We see this all the time in like ancient writings when people have similar account
Mhm.
stories. That means something was going on, right? Whether you believe one story or the other, you can at least admit that, like, hey, there's a shared experience that people are trying to recount.
Right. Right.
So we've been hearing this word Coptic Nubia. So sometimes you may hear the term Nubia or Coptic Nubia or medieval Nubia, kind of talking in the same time frame. Medieval Nubia Christianity goes into like the late 15, 1600s. It talks about it relishes around the Sudanic regions, which includes Chad, which is important because people often forget Chad, the Chadic region being part of the West African region as well too. And these people are descendants of ancient Kush. And so primarily when people talk about the Coptic influence, they're going to be talking about the Coptic influence through Nubia. When they talk about that side of this equation. And so people, as you see on the blue side, like Saint Anthony, for example, he's considered a Nubian. Moses the Black, for example, if you ever read about him, he's a Nubian. These are people of darker hue. And so I'll be remiss to say this is like, people are wondering, like, in the Bible, well, where's Nubia? It's depicted as Cush, as you can see, ancient Cush.
Right.
And the great account in the Ethiopian eunuch, for example, we often, not a misnomer, but we have to also know the context in which things were written. Ethiopia at that time wasn't a kingdom or empire named
Right.
Ethiopia. Ethiopians means blacks, people from south of what they had as Egypt at this time. So that person could have been anywhere from Nubia all the way to present day Ethiopia, Eritrea, Kenya, whatever the region he came. It's a reflection of showing what basically what skin tone he was, just burnt faced people.
Right. But we know where he's from because of who he worked for, right? Because in the Book of
Bingo.
Acts, it talks about Kendeke, right? And she's the queen mother, right? The equivalent of the Nesut, the pharaoh in Kemet. So, and we know that she resided in Moro, Nubia. So that gives us more clarity and also early attestation of a sub-Saharan African who is a Christian in the Bible. So,
Bingo.
mhm.
Let's see. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the North Africans. So North Africans, quick overview. They go from literally the area of North Africa through the Sahel region. So you have places like ancient Carthage or African Proconsular, Numidia, the two Mauritanias, which are in the Roman provinces. They were called the quote unquote Berber tribes, and some and Punics as well too, because the Punics are descendants of the Phoenicians who settled in the Carthage region. It's important to note that they were not Roman by lineage. They were not Latin by ethnicity. They were not Roman Catholic, because Roman Catholic was not at that time was not a term used to describe a particular church. And it is important to note because these people did not live in a world where what we have today, where you put a quote unquote black church, white church. They're somewhat part of the Church of Rome. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Pope Leo, one of the early Roman popes, was a Berber, was an African Berber. So you have evidence here, remembering that these metropolitan areas like Rome, Alexandria, Carthage, around the Mediterranean, were not just one ethnicity. It served with a ton of ethnicity. So a big good equivalent today would be no different than like BK. You go into New York, you're going to see all types of people from different backgrounds in this
Yep.
metropolitan city. You're going to see the same thing in like places like Los Angeles,
Mhm.
Chicago, where these people from all over the world and all over the country, these different backgrounds, all living here. So just to say that, hey, and that taking this for granted, but like they're saying BK is from New York City, right? And Donald Trump is from New York City. So ergo, BK and Donald Trump are the same ethnic group.
And we are most definitely not.
Right, right. So now we can kind of understand this aspect of it. And so they spoke what they say African Latin, sometimes called Africitas or African Romance, which is basically the Latin language with a North African tongue and long words too, similar to what we have today in like the Creole languages, where you know there's English and then there's Creole English or different variations of that. Is French, is Creole French, Haitian French, and Spanish, the same thing. All these different, we see this to this day. So it's not something new. They spoke Punic as well, from Carthage, and then the different Berber languages, like we talked about before. So this is amazing quote. BK, would you like reading this one?
Sure. In North Africa, the inhabitants along the coast were Christians. And furthermore, the Christian message had already penetrated Numidia. In the interior of the Atlas Mountains, there existed in the 3rd century 20 bishops. The faith was preached to the Getatilians and to the Mauritanians before the persecution of Emperor Decius took place. The Berber Kabyles were also Christians, and at the time of Augustine, Christianity reached as far as the forts of the edge of the Sahara Limes, which stretched along the Atlas Range. Kabylie was a Greek town in the interior of Thracia. Today, it is called Galawitsa and is situated in the Tonja River.
Perfect, perfect. Go to the next one.
All right. The Berber tribes of Libya and North Africa originally grouped themselves as Nasamons and Scilly in Crynesia and Tripolitania. Tall and slender figure, the Maxites, Musulani, and Numidu, man, Katuri, and the Mori. It is not known how, but a small group of Mori came to live in Hausa country. The Berbers were nearly all Christians. Accordingly, the Christians of Barbary were at that time divided into 3 groups: the Catholics, the Donatists, and the Monophysites.
So I want to explain this quote a little bit more, and I definitely understand BK. These words are like
Yeah, the word's
it's
crazy.
crazy,
Yeah, yeah.
but essentially these are different like Berber tribes, right? And so they would have different chiefdoms. There were different names. Um, Oftentimes you're going to hear terms like um Numidia, Numidu, Mari, for example. And Mari is always a big one because I love it because Mari is the root word which we later get more from. And so if people ever want to ask like, who the Moors were, I guess according to this, the Moors were originally Christians before they were anything else. And so
Uh-oh.
it was the Moors that went down into West Africa later as Christians, as we will see later on, to establish Christianity there. So, if you ever want to kind of bring that back to when you're talking to, brothers and sisters on the other sides of the fences, to let them know, like, hey, man, the Moors are Christians first.
Boy.
And at the bottom here, I wanted to talk about where it says the Catholics, the Donatists, and the Monophysites, right? And so this is coming from the author, and so we just got to make sure we put things in the proper perspectives. By Catholics and the Donatists, for example, it's talking about they're talking about those who were more adherent to Rome, and then the Donatist schism, who was more reflective of those who were in North Africa, particularly Numidia and Mauritania, the Numidians and the Moors. Those groups, theologically, they believe the same thing. Expressions, they believe the same thing. It was, for lack of a better word, without going to full context behind it, you had one group who was like, "Hey, we're not bending the knee to the other group," and you can kind of figure out
Mhm.
what that means even in today's language. So even before, which you had the events going on in the 14th, 15th, 16th century in Western Europe, you had North Africa,
Politics as usual.
as
That's what
politics as usual. Yeah,
politics as usual.
we're not bending the knee to this, and etc. And then Monophysites, this being an older text, ends up being a whole background behind that. Again, as BK said, the politics again is what you would call those who are now non-Chalcedonian in the what we call today the Oriental Orthodox tradition, and the more accurate terminology today is Miaphysite instead of Monophysite. But again, this is an older text, so they're using kind of older terminology. But essentially, they were arguing over the Christology expression of, how do we do, is Christ one nature or two natures, right? Is he
Right.
a God and one his full the hypostatic union being fully God and fully man, two natures into the hypostatic union. That's the Chalcedian side. It's kind of what we all inherited here in the U.S. That language, or the other language being that God has one nature. I mean, Christ, I'm sorry, has one nature, and that one nature is fully God and fully man. I know it sounds very silly today when you come out, but again, we're talking about politics with language and a lot of bloodshed over the years. Luckily, they have, a lot of people have scholars have realized that throughout time that these groups are saying the same things, and now we're in the healing process, but it's a lot of baggage. So, just like today, there was politics that
Hmm.
separated believers. So, as a consequence of Arab suppression, a movement amongst the Berber tribes began, especially among the Western Sahyan, who pushed into the Western Sahara on the bend of the Niger. In the 3rd century AH, again, this is because you're looking from Islamic text, the 9th century AD, the Lambunta Berbers were still Christians. Many signs speak to the Inkavara of the Tuareg as having been partial descendants of the Christian Gomarites, Makarites, and Mazites of the Atlas, of the Hawa, and of the Auroras and people of Targa. And I'm sorry, all of these words are just different tribes of
Right.
North Africans. So when you see Atlas, you're talking about the Atlas Mountains there. And one of the sources you can get that is the Berbers in West Africa, early Christianity in Africa, North Africa, the Sahara, the Sudan, Central and East Africa, a contribution to ethno-history by Ludwig Brandal, Das Presence in Africa. So, you know what, BK, if you don't mind, read this for
Yeah.
the water.
No problem. Trans-Saharan trade. The importance that contact with the Islamic world held for these empires cannot be understated. While extensive trading networks undoubtedly predated Arabic involvement, the development of trans-Saharan commerce in the 7th century by Arabs and Berbers intensified and expanded the trading networks that made the empires of the Western Sudan possible. The Savannah region is naturally hospitable to both agriculture and livestock breeding and is ideally situated for trade. An easily traversed region separating radically different environments, each possessing resources and products badly needed by the other, it is likely that the savannah was an important trading arena long before the first camel caravans arrived from North Africa, 3rd to 4th century AD.
So what this is saying basically is showing you the beginning of the train. One, that these routes already began, but the Arab suppression that ends up coming into West Africa and North Africa made people flee. No, and they fled into places that they knew long before the first, as they said, the 3rd, 4th century AD. Like these were known places to go. And we see this today, right? Like when people flee for whatever reason, it could be famine, it can be wartime, it can be stuff like that. They typically take the same routes that they always historically done. Like I live in Louisiana, for example, and we're in the middle of hurricane season. So when people want to evacuate for hurricane season, they typically take the same routes that they've always taken. They don't have to be kind of taught and told to go this way or that way. They know the roads, they know the back roads, they even know the places that they should go to avoid the storm for the most part. So just like here, when they have the oppression going on, they know where to go.
Right.
So I want to describe here the Hutchins Center And this is the prequel to the video we're going to show. But the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research at Harvard University supports research on the history and culture of people of African descent of the world over, and provides a forum for collaboration and the ongoing exchange of ideas. It seeks to stimulate scholarly engagement in Africa and African American studies, both at Harvard and beyond, to increase public awareness and understanding of this vital field of study. As the preeminent research center in the field, the Hutchins Center sponsors visiting fellows, art exhibitions, publications, research projects, archives, readings, conferences, and new media initiatives that respond to and excite the interest in establishing and emerging channels of inquiry in African and African American research. Woohoo.
All right, so you want to play the video now, or
Let me see the next slide real quick. Just want to make sure that I'm not missing something before I introduce it.
yeah, that's next slide right there.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to play. I'm going to pay. Let me play this clip from the Hutchins Center real quick.
All right. What up to my man Bill for Speed? It's good to see you, sir. We got my man SOC in the building. I know you saw Deadpool. We gotta talk about that. We got Bodega Lady D New. We got Andela Armstrong. All right, let's go.
We could bring in Baghdad and other places, that you find the development of these central planned cities, a lot of the early ones in the borderland between Spain and France, a time of change and shifting identities, a very international period. And it's been argued for similar central planned cities in parts of Cameroon that, in fact, these are not for fortresses. These are for keeping goods and people on the inside, controlling trade, collecting taxes, and the like. And we have an early example of this in the area of Lake Chad, where, by the way, there are also bricks. And bricks have been said to have been found in Ife, also baked bricks. What is the source of this? We simply do not know. People could have been traveling from Ife and elsewhere. It was a major trade center. People could have been coming into this area. And whether one is talking about Ife or other Yoruba and Hausa centers, many of them carry the same plan. My guess is that they're coming by way of references to city planning in manuscripts and or other related knowledge. And it goes to the degree that in Ife, there's also a similar division, a quadripartite division of the city into different dynastic zones, different areas of identity, and the division of the year accordingly, with shrines in these various parts that are visited on this kind of cycle of events. Now, what I want to emphasize here, I don't have the right slide up for it, but whatever is happening in Ife is uniquely Ife. It's uniquely Yoruba. It is a stunning tradition of bronzes, glassmaking, textiles, etc., that speak to the ways in which they were as interested in what was happening elsewhere as elsewhere was interested in what was happening there. But I think that it's important to recognize that Africa early on was very international. And while for a long time we've assumed that this internationalization came primarily by way of the Muslim world across the Sahara, I think we have to rethink that. I think we have to look at the close connections, likely connections between the Coptic world and West Africa. We're finding Mamluk vessels in Ghana, in northern Nigeria. That certainly is part of it. But trading routes are key to this larger context. And we can find in Nigeria examples of armor that could come from many sources in its origins. But if you look at the top of the helmet in the bottom center with that cross-like form, it leaves me to think that perhaps there is more likely a Christian identity than otherwise. And even how this armor is created also finds parallels in one of these great figures from the 14th century that was found at the key crossing point of the Niger River. Whoever controlled two of these crossing points controlled all the trade going east, west, north, and south along the Niger River. It was massive and it was important. And they're developed here among.
So let me stop sharing my screen here. So what does this mean? And this is a almost 2-hour portion of this conference back in 2017, and there's like 4 or 5 sessions of it. I just want to show this one in particular, and you can watch this at your own at your own leisure, because it's a great watch in by itself, and you can with the link that we had just in the slideshow. But what's that showing is, as she was stating, is that there's a within Africa, trading and relationships going on, as you said before, from the Nubian region all the way into the Nigerian Benue, northern Nigerian region. And as she even stated, some of even the work that you would have on the soldiers with the crosses, as you saw on the hilts of the helmets and the metalwork, were uniquely from this region, coming from within Africa. And so you see Africans within the continent, not only talking and trading and doing things with each other, but now we see that, wait a second, this is going into West Africa, and these unique artifacts are being in West Africa that do not come from outside of Africa, that do not come from European contact, it's coming from within. And then they having again these different Christian hilts. So if we go back to our slideshow, we'll preview for our next iteration real quick.
Well, before the next slide, I just want to re-emphasize the fact that they've discovered, it's African-based metallurgy, right? It wasn't stuff that they got from other European nations. This is homegrown armory, chainmail, helmets, right? They did it. They had the technology. It was homegrown. So
correct. And it's important to know, because a lot of times people will wonder, well, why haven't I heard this stuff before? And these conferences happen all the time around the world, and people are talking about what's going on within Africa, and really finding out that these civilizations, these advancements were not of European origin or Asian origin. They're coming from within Africa, and with these artifacts, they're finding uniquely African, uniquely Christian African origins of it. So I'm going to read this quote, and then I'm going to play another clip real quick.
Oh, there's the one right here. I like this one.
So this comes from the Journal of African History, Volume 8, Number 3, comes 1967, pages 383 to 393. It's 11 pages, published by Cambridge University Press. In the 1700s, reports from Tripoli reached the congregation of the Propaganda Fide in Rome that Christians, little or uninstructed in the faith, were living in Bornu. Further inquiries revealed that these rumors related not to the kingdom of Bornu, but to a neighboring rival kingdom, that of Gofor or Camphor. The two sons of the ruler of Bornu, interviewed in Cairo, stated that in Kaffaran, these people who venerate the cross and erect it over the houses and churches, while the French consul at Tripoli reported how he had seen slaves from the Gaffur who made the sign of the cross. In June 1710, 2 Franciscans attempting to establish contact with these Christians set out from Tripoli and passed through Marzak Agages, and were later reported to have died in Kassana in 1711. Hawassa and Bornu sources indicate that these reports were almost certainly referred to the Kafari, who on several occasions in the 17th century attacked Kanu and Bornu. It is then pointed out that the Maltese cross was one of the motifs still used in the 20th century as a decoration by the Aku of Wakari, the ruler of Jukun, who are among the principal survivors of the Kafara. At least a section of the inhabitants of Wakara, also preserve a clearly remembered tradition of having taken part in the migrationary journey from the Neolithic Sudan to the Benue. And then one thing about one more thing. It is suggested, therefore, that the reports from the French consul and the Franciscans, although garbled and consisting in the main of the secondhand evidence, strengthen the possibility that the Maltese crosses used in the Jukun, in Nupe, and Benin indicate influence from which emanated originally from Christian Nubia, and perhaps connected with the Kisar traditions. And as I get myself ready, I want to show, because I think this author, and we're going to talk about more about this, what this piece means in a second, but I want her to kind of explain it better than I can, and then we'll follow up. And you guys gonna kind of love this.
Yes, sir. Big up to DMG in the building. What's going on, sir?
And I won't show every single because it's every single clip, but I'm going to show you some things just as you say, as you can see how it starts, because I want y'all to see how it starts. So it says the arts of pre-colonial Africa. So you know where we're talking about right now. And let's get it going.
Of things that I was seeing through various forms of evidence in the middle of Africa, in what is today Nigeria and adjacent countries of Chad and Cameroon, that make me really want to rethink the whole history of Christianity in this part of the world. And you can see these hints through various articles, but also through various artworks and artifacts. One of the most important is this article on Christian traces and Franciscan mission by Gray, which basically tells the story of a ship off the coast of Tripoli with some Franciscan priests. They ring the bell, call to prayer, and a group of Africans who are enslaved go to the service. And the priests are really shocked to see them there, but they discover that they are in fact Christian. And they move, I guess, eventually to Italy. And the Pope decides he's really curious about this great center of Christianity in the heart of Africa, and sent a delegation down across Libya and into the area of what is Chad and down toward Nigeria, but they never make it. So it's a kind of one of those stories that we're missing the end, but it's an important tale in its own right.
So I want to stop right there before we go further, and just because of other things I want to talk about within this clip. But there's an amazing I hope y'all paid attention. And BK, we can talk about this for a bit. What she's saying is that these Africans who were already enslaved, when they were around and the priest is ringing the bell, calling to service, they respond and they know what to do, and they are doing the things that they would assume Christians should do. And they're like, wait, what's going on?
Because we didn't teach them this. Like, how they know this?
How you know this, right? And as you see, they go on to Italy, and the Pope, and I think this is very important, the Pope, the Bishop of Rome, who, for a lot of people in the outside our community, is like the boogeyman of Christianity, right? Like, the Pope did the Pope say this, Pope say this. What the Pope is saying, where these Black Africans come from? Because with this, like, we didn't teach them this. I have no record of any Roman Catholic missionaries at that time going into that portion of Africa. So I'm curious. So as she stated, they sent delegations to see what's going on, and they never made it. And what did she send them to?
But peep the arrogance, though, right? How do they can't know it because we didn't teach it to them.
Because we didn't teach it to them.
I find this strange. Let's investigate.
And he sends his delegation, right? They never make it. But what does he send them to? He didn't send them to North Africa. He sent them to the Nigerian region, the Chad region. And he's curious because he's hearing reports of these Christians in this interior of Africa. Like, wait on a second. Like we've all been told that it's the Portuguese that brought this into West Africa, and then it was the Europeans. But here, the Pope, at this point in time, when slavery is already kicked off, he's already written his papal bull. The previous Pope has written the papal bulls and all this other stuff. And now these Africans in interior Africa are responding to basic Christian call and response calls. And he's like, wait, what's going on? Like, wait a second, let's investigate. I found that remarkable and amazing, just because now the boogeyman of you got your Christianity from the Portuguese and the Roman Catholic Church. Well, we had the head of that church is saying, no, not us. Like, I don't know where you got this from. Like, right. It came from somewhere, right? Like, I wonder where would it come from? BK, anything you want to add to this one?
Nah, but again, right? It's proof positive. It's like We didn't do it. How did they get it? Because they didn't get it from us. Guess where they got it from?
So I'm gonna show a couple more clips from here. But as I do it, I want y'all to see just on the side, even if it's my screen's not big enough, but she has categories that she goes into her paper on this matter, where he talks about the bells, manufacturing, glass, elephant and ostrich artifacts, metallurgy, textiles, roads, masquerades, Coptic robes, stone courts, walled cities, quadrants, armor, military, geography, trafficking, maps, healing centers, facial markings, brick cisterns, GS mappings, Y-DNA, Coptic calendar, Nubian trade, Coptic trade, Egyptian hieroglyphs. So again, this isn't me. These are scholars in this field. Again, this is from Harvard University that's showing like, wait a second, something else is going on here. So I'm gonna let her speak more on the matter and then also just go to her conclusion just for the sake of time.
Mm-hmm.
What is the evidence for Christianity? How do we identify Christianity in the remains, archaeological or even living remains of this area? Buildings are relatively little help, except if they're made out of stone, as places like Lalibela are in Ethiopia. But even in Ethiopia and places to the east, Christian centers, temples, places of worship often take the form of vernacular architecture of the area, round circular houses, as in the Coptic church on the left, sometimes made of earth and other materials, not so dissimilar from what one would find in places such as the Nupe area of Nigeria. One thing, however, that I do think is quite important in terms of identifying Christianity are bells. Bells are one of the most important items that not only announce religious services, but also take on another role as well, other roles as well, from the vantage point not only of church services, but also in some cases things such as ritual.
Jingle bells, jingle
You said,
bells,
you silly.
jingle. So, so I'm just forward to the bottom. Again, you got when you have a chance to like, read her works and also look at this about an hour long video.
So without the Pope's influence, right? They had bells for religious ceremonies on their
Yes,
own. That this isn't from Catholicism at all. This is African. Thoroughly African. All right, continue.
Which is why they knew when they heard the bells for service, right? Like they knew exactly what to do and how to respond, which surprised the others.
So just to conclude, I think that there's an awful lot of evidence that suggests that there was something here in this part of Africa that was happening, something that connects it deeply with the Coptic and Christian traditions that are particularly part of the culture of the Nile. And there was communication and ideas going in both directions. And I also think that as part of this, we also have to rethink not only the importance of this as a center for manufacturing and for an incredible production of art, but realize that these arts, there's nothing like them in Europe at this time, and that their importance, therefore, stands in its own right, even as we are beginning to think about the impacts of some of these goods coming in and how they may have encouraged local artists to think about things in a new way.
And so when you guys have a chance to watch that whole video, she talks about the fact that that when they discovered some of this work, even up to the 20th century, they attribute it to being finding Atlantis. They went into West Africa and they found all of this growth and all of this
it can't be black folk. It can't be black folk doing it, B. It got to be the Atlanteans. It got to be the ancient aliens.
It was the right? From Atlanteans today, we go to ancient aliens. Like whatever it is, it's not black folk. It's the Atlanteans and ancient aliens. So even back then, like they could not imagine, as I said earlier, even with Leo Africanus, they could not imagine that in interior of Africa there was this much advancement in civilization. So they had to attribute it to something else, some spooky stuff, right? And so just want to put that out there. And this is just the preface to a paper. The woman talking is Professor Susan Preston Biller. And it says this paper explores the importance of new technologies in the art historical study of medieval West Africa and how related methodologies both help us understand the important art and architectural landscape here in this period, and how Africa and the Eastern Coptic Christian world helped reshape Africa in this era.
Nice.
A key focus of this discussion, as what she stated, are various art historically rich sites in West Africa, Ife, Wassa, Bornu, Mafa, in Nigeria, Cameroon, and Chad, and how they may relate to the larger African European diaspora. And then she's talking about just Africans in Europe. And you can replace Europe and just put, say, African American or African Caribbean or African Canadian or whatever you want to put, the diaspora. At the same time, this paper will include will also take up, the importance of new technologies such as GIS, DNA, and geological analysis in addressing these and other issues that are important to understanding the broader role that economy, trade, and religion have played in these and other contexts. BK, you want to take this one?
Europeans did not enter the interior of Africa at any success prior to the 19th century. This is the only documented European in West Africa prior to the 15th century. Jume Ferrer sailed from Majorca down the West African coast to find the legendary, quote, River of Gold in 1346. But the outcome of his quest and his fate are unknown. Based on the time period, Europeans would have documented any settlement or exploration. Also, the Moors of Mali would have documented any Europeans.
Boom.
Continue or?
Oh, yeah, continue on.
Passing, therefore, westward from the island of Syene, you enter to the province of Nubia, bordering on the west upon Gagor, eastward upon the river Nilus, towards the north upon Egypt, and southward upon the desert of Goran. The inhabitants thereof, called by Strabo Enus, who at this present, as Francisco Alvarez reporteth, a most miserable and wretched kind of life. For hauling lost the sincerity and the light of the gospel, they do embrace infinite corruptions of the Jewish and Mahomet religions.
So here we begin to see the change that happens. People wonder, so what happened? We begin to talking about what happened to these Christians. Well, a certain group entered into Africa, and it was essentially get down or lay down.
Right.
And I'm not talking about the Europeans at this point either.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, when the aforesaid Alvarez was in Abysia, there came certain messengers out of Nubia to make suit unto the Pret that he would send them priests and such persons as might preach and administer the sacraments unto them.
Cool.
But he returned answer that he could not in regard of the sacraments of great clergymen of his dominions. The said messengers reported that the Nubians had sent often to Rome for a bishop, but being afterward by the invasions of the Moors and the calamities of war cut short of that assistance, they fell for want of teachers and ministers into extreme ignorance of Christian religion, and by little and little were infected by the impious and abominable sects of the Jews and Mohammedans.
So this work, and if you guys have wondering why is it hard to read and follow, is actually not. This is not in English. This is older French translation that I had to get translated into English for our presentation, but it chronicles that transition period from when the Arab Muslims are documenting the Christians and even the Jews at the time, and that transition to where now we know a lot of in Northeast Africa and North Africa and even parts of West Africa, where we have a lot of Islamic influence, is telling you exactly what happened, that they were cut off from other Christians, and the numbers began to shrink and shrink and shrink, and it became ignorance of the religion. Again, we're not saying it disappeared, but the numbers began to shrink because you had an invading force that essentially said to get down, to lay down.
Yep.
So catch this. After the Council of Chalcedon in 451, Egypt accepted the doctrine of monophysitism, which then found its way to Ethiopia. As we were just earlier, we talked about, again, it's more older text, but we talked about what that actually means truly today. The political revolutions in the year of 550, 630, and 639 were followed by the expulsion of entire tribes out of Egypt. With the occupation of Egypt by the Persians in 1618, 630, and their withdrawal in 630, the so-called Caesarea or Caesarea legend begins.
Wait a minute. So these Africans from Egypt got kicked out by the Persians.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when they left with this message.
Bingo.
Which was basically the gospel.
I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy.
But they came from Egypt, though. They came from Egypt.
I'm just a nobody, Chelsea. Trying to kill somebody.
I'm just saying. So they were there. They got kicked out because of the Persians. And as they traveled along, they told people about Yeshua. Is that what you're trying to tell us, B?
I'm trying. You know what? I wish I could say this was just me, but it's not me. I'm agreeing with him, but it's not me.
Oh man.
So check this out. The legend is probably about the people of Persian occupation troops who belonged to the Coptic and Nestorian faiths. According to this legend, the wanderings of these people lasted until the year 1000 and led the Qaddafi, Darfur, and Lake Friti, and Maduri, Yola, and Kifi to the region of Zara and Karichi. Here, they split into two main groups. One group founded the kingdoms of Busa and Lu around the river Niger. The other traveled into the region of Wakari, Jukun, and Panda on the river Benue, while again another group pushed on Tagara, also called Atagara, after Ait, the father of Ida, which is the title. Ida is also a town in the river Niger today. Let's keep going. I wonder what this means. The Yoruba or Kun, however, are related to the pre-Islamic Berberdom and to the Christian empires of the Nile and Abyssinia.
Wait a minute. So the Yoruba were originally Christian?
They said it, not me.
Wow. Okay, continue.
Okay. And then we go down saying living, and this is just to quote me getting the original text in non-English, because that's always fun. When we follow the wanderers of the people of the Caesar legends, we shall make a special observation concerning Nigeria, namely a repeated appearance of the village named Nasawa. Wait, hold on. Let's slow it down. One village is near Yola, one near Kefe, and one in the west of Gosa. The village name Naswara shows the Hausa word Nasara, which is Christian, taken from the Arabic word Asara, a country, Nasara, a country, a place of the Christians.
So they had a whole village. They had a whole village called Christian.
A whole village called Christian that's named after the word Nasara, the Wasa word. So again, this ain't my work. This is coming from Arabic writers talking about, hey, there are villages named after Christians in West Africa, as you can see to this day. And I want to talk a little bit more about the Kisara legend, because people always wonder about these legends and what's going on. Like, what does this mean? Well, legends, of course, if anything, we're not saying legends are always 100% true and facts, right? But what legends do tell us from a scholarly standpoint is that there was an understanding of that time that tells a deeper story. So I'll give an example, like the legend of King Arthur, for example.
Right.
Now we may not, maybe King Arthur was a real person or wasn't, right? But scholars can say the acts associated with him are often associated with a number of smaller kings and chiefs around that oftentimes be attributed to the legend of King Arthur, whether real or not real. The fact is that these things that happened lived in the memory of these people, and that this king or sets of kings or rulers tried to unite this portion of Europe under a Christian crown, which we know happened.
Wow.
Just saying.
Right.
I'll go back one more time, BK. I just want to show also for brothers and sisters, if you ever, I know Dr. Vince Bantu has talked about this, but if you ever want to find another word that you can use for Christian, maybe you want something more indigenous. Again, the Hausa word Nasara is this for you. So in case you want to, put that in your tool book to say, hey man, maybe I want to use a more indigenous term for Christian. I mean, there you go, right there.
Nice.
In any case, when merchants pushed their way down south from the Ahara, Gobir, Kanuka, and Nubia, they possibly had met near the Nassauer Gate of Kanu, which is one of the wall gates built in the 12th century under Sakurai Yura, which the ruler Rifa 1463 to 1490 reinforced. Bachu in Nor, then in Nigeria, was called the Jakaba in early terms, named after a woman. The Tiv who live close to the Jukun have a sky god who they call Kali Adu, which is heaven. And this is coming from the early Christianity in Africa, North Africa, the Sahara, Sudan, Central Asia, and East Africa by the same book that we were talking about. And so I want to just finish off real quickly here, or even hand it here, talk about the kingdom of Prester John, because people always want to know about, like, what is that? You seen this earlier about Prester John. What does that mean? Prester John, as you can see in this picture, what you saw in this picture, all that yellow area was the alleged kingdom of Prester John, the legend of Prester John, this area. This kind of middle region that you see Nubia here, you see Egypt at the top part, you see Arabia. So you can see the yellow area that they attributed to him goes into West Africa and also parts of the Congo as well too. Now it is a legend. We're not saying it's true, but what it is saying is that in the minds of the people of the day, they knew there was something powerful of a Christian priest, king, or ruler in that part of Africa that they were sure was there. As you can see, we already talked about that even as late as 1700s, that there was still something going on that many of the Europeans had no clue about. So, BK, if you don't mind reading
Sure.
the next 2 points.
The Europeans were aware that there were Christians in Abyssinia. Following the Islamic conquest during the 7th century AD, however, contact between the two areas was severed. Around the time when the Europeans no longer believed that Central Asia was the land of Prester John, contact between Europe and Abyssinia were reestablished. During the 14th century, Abyssinian emissaries had reached the coasts of Europe, while Dominican missionaries made it as far as Central Africa. Thus, by the end of the century, it was commonly agreed in Europe that Prester John was the ruler of Abyssinia. In one version of the legend, Prester John is said to have retired to Abyssinia after he was defeated by Genghis Khan, thus making a connection between the stories from the 14th and 13th centuries.
So the reason why this is important again to talk about is not to say that was this person true or not true. It's the fact that it was important enough that people were even attributing at this time some legendary African Christian clergy preacher king in the interior parts of West Africa today. So that means that people were having fantasies about African Christian kings in the interior of Africa. But they told us that we didn't know about Christianity until the Portuguese came. Yet as early as this time, they're dreaming and having fantasies about something going on there. They're excited, like, wow, there's got to be this great Christian king, because this is coming at a time where they're trying to defeat the Islamic incursions. So they're like, hey, we got another ally on our side. We need to get in contact with them so we can get these Muslims up out of here.
Right. Crazy. But again, to your point, right? legends have some thing of truth to them, right? Why would people think of this great Christian ruler if there wasn't a couple of Christian rulers, right? So,
That's it. So this is coming from great esteemed scholar Dr. Vince Bantu. And I'll read it just as he stated. The receipts continue. I'm still grinding on this article in the spread of the Bisrat gospel in West Africa from before the colonialism, but today I finally got hold of the Arabic edition of Ibn Adawi's Chronicle, which included Mansa Musa's claim that he had Christians, Nasari, in his Mali kingdom in the 1330s. There is a longer story of acquiring this text in the middle of a pandemic, but praise be Tilly God for bringing this to light. Full articles on the way. So I think the next slide may show you just the example of that article. As I think most of us in the UA have seen this and seen
yep.
people talk about it in some way, form, or fashion. And you can see the text right here on screen. He's talking about this area. And I'm gonna just talk about a little bit, two things here. The SIC markings and the Takru. So I'm gonna talk about Takru first, or Takur, depending on how you say it. The Takur or Takru was a small Christian kingdom at the time, and I say Christian kingdom because they actually called them, is a Christian kingdom, according to the sources. That was at the time of Ghana before Mali entered in, and Mali, when it grows and takes over, soon annexes this kingdom as part of their kingdom, so it just becomes the Takru region. Later on, we see that the uh the Arabs ended referring to all of West Africans as Takru. So I think that's pretty dope to it, that now you have, even to this day, you can find sources that Arabic people are referring to West Africans in particular as Takru people, which was, as you see, but like a land in West Africa that belonged to the Christians.
So what do you want me to do? You want me to read this, or like, what do you
Oh
want
no,
to?
yeah, you can read it. Yeah, let's go ahead and read it for the people.
In this year, 724, 1324, the king of Takor arrived, making for the noble Hijaz. His name was Abu Bakr B. Musa. He remained in Egypt for a year before betaking himself to Hijaz. He had much gold with him. He is the country which puts forth gold. I heard that Qadi Fa'u Adin, inspector of the victorious army, say, I asked the king of Takor, how is the description of the place where gold grows with you? He replied, it is not in the part of our land that belongs to the Muslims, but in the land which belongs to the Christians of the Takor. We dispatch collectors to take from them a species of tribute due to us and obligatory upon them. These are special lands which put forth gold in this fashion. It consists of small pieces of various sizes, some like little rings, some like carob seeds, and the like. Little ring, yeah, and the like. The Caliph al-Din continued, I said, why don't you take this land by conquest? He replied, if we conquer them and take it, it does not put forth anything. We have done this in many ways, but seen nothing there. But when it returns to them, it puts forth as usual.
So not only is this important about the Christians had to go, but it's important to note, um, because we had some people that may have questions about the SIC marking in there in the previous text, because on the Christians, people say, "Oh, well, he wasn't talking about Christians, etc., etc." Yes and no, right? So the SIC is often means to say, like, you're not going to find this direct word in the original translation when in medieval West African Arabic, which is true. You won't find a direct word Christian. What you're going to find is Nasara or Naswara. And like, why is that? It's because during that time, they would refer to those typically in the African lands, and even Asian lands, as derivatives of the followers of the Nazarene, because during those times, your sect was named after the founder of your sect. So you often see in old literature like Mohammedans, for example. Like we would say just Muslims, right? But during those times it was followers of Muhammad, you would call Mohammedans. Even in Jewish literature, those who followed different teachers were just named after that teacher, and so on and so forth, right? Uh, um, in that time, because Jesus is Jesus of Nazareth, it would make more sense from those speaking from a more Afro-Asiatic language and tongue. They're just following their customs. So you're going to see derivatives of Nazari, stuff like that in regards to Christians, that people who are believing in Yeshua Mashiach, Jesus the Christ. And oftentimes you would see the term Christian often referred to those who come from a more Latin and Greek speaking language, because they would then use from the Messiah, they would use the derivatives of Christonoi, and there's been shows all about that, about how we get the word Christ from Messiah, and basically it is from the Hebrew to Aramaic to Koine Greek, Latin, all the way to English, etc. So it's a linguistic thing, and oftentimes when you see that derivative of Nazarene, Naswari, it should be a clue in your mind to say, okay, we're talking about people from either more likely Africa or the western parts of Asia.
Right. All right. Cool. So,
So
boom.
we'll finish up here. This is just a map that I did. It took all of the data, right? And this is reading all of the text that we talked about, and we'll see the source materials at the end. And I want to mark all the places where they said that they had Christians and Christian communities. And so you can always hit me up, and I'll more than likely, more than happy to send it to you. But you can see these different areas. As you can see, it's not all of West Africa. It's not a majority, it's not a minority. We're not saying what it is. We're just saying, hey, it's significant enough to where these writers over those centuries and oral traditions pointed out that this is where these people were.
Yep.
And so I think it's important for us to know what's going on during that time. And my last couple of slides we'll see is this is a figure that they unearthed in the northern Nigerian region in that time frame. As you can see, this is clearly an African man we would call looks very much so West African, but you can see on his neck you see a cross. So
Yep.
this is one of the artifacts that they're talking about. They're showing this colonialism Christianity in the West African region. Again, this is northern Nigeria.
And also peep the contextualization though, right? Because one of the critiques people have about Christianity is that once you accept the gospel, you have to give up all your culture. Clearly, this individual did not. He still looks very African,
Very much.
right?
Facial markings and all.
Facial markings and all. He just threw on the cross, kept it moving, right? So you can still, like, whatever is not antithetical to the gospel, you can keep. You can still keep your African heritage.
Bingo.
In fact, fun fact, when it comes to ancient Kemet, one of the things that they would do when a new god or a new belief system would come in, the people of Kemet would do iconoclasm. They would destroy the previous idols and deities because they no longer worship those things. So when these people from Kemet accepted the gospel, guess what they did?
The same thing they know how to do.
What came naturally to those Africans.
The African thing.
It was the African thing to do. So I just wanted to add that. So anyway, that was for free. That was for free. So
the last few slides, these are just a number of the sources of this presentation. You can take the time, you can look them up, you can read them for yourself, you can study them, you can again, even more sources here. And I think it's important to note, like, these are sources that have been out for a long time that a lot of our people were just not aware of. And so oftentimes when people have a pushback against this, it's going to be because they just weren't aware. And because you don't know, you assume that it doesn't exist, or you can as my brother Jamel would say, try to speak on the quantity instead of just understanding the attendance, like they were there. And so when you guys we appreciate you tuning in. I think this is going to be a major move, not just for the UA, but just for the communities as a whole, to bring this information to light, to say, hey, look, this doesn't mean you have to accept the gospel. This isn't an evangelism presentation. This doesn't mean that you even have to say Christianity is true, but you have to at least say, from a historical standpoint, based off of what everybody said, that yes, this faith tradition existed
Right.
prior to colonialism. And even as you can tell from the presentation, the sources are saying even prior to European contact. But we're just saying at least prior to colonialism that this existed, and it came from other Africans within the continent.
Right. It's it's a belief that came from other Africans. Now, did it originate in Africa? No. All right. Christianity, Day of Pentecost in Jerusalem, that's where it started. But man, to see how the gospel spread without the sword, by the way, from east and north all the way to the west. You know what I mean? And B Wash is rocking. What's that again, sir?
This is that Daze cross, also called the Berber cross. This is one of those renditions of what you were talking about.
Nice.
You get close to the screen, but what happens is you'll have people say, well, oh no, that's not a Christian cross. This was part of the Berber peoples prior. But the thing about it is, just like the Coptic cross was a rendition of the Ankh, they took something that was native to them,
Right.
and then they expressed it in a way that their new faith tradition could be true. So just as the Ankh meant life, and they're like, wait a second, the cross represents new life.
Right.
Boom. Berbers did the same thing, so on and so forth. So I just want to show that.
So they were expressing their Africanness when
Yes.
it came to their theology.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it, huh?
Who'd have thunk it, And so again, as we talked about earlier, please, those of you, we want people to pay attention, to really watch and pay attention to the presentation. If you have critiques, please critique the information, learn it, understand it more. And back to what we said at the beginning, there's a difference. Understand what we're saying and what we're not saying, because oftentimes what happens is that we will get pushback on stuff that we're not saying,
Right.
as if we should say it. And as BK said earlier, if you put in the comments that you want to say this, that, and the third, we will have no problem exposing it out and say, okay, is this in line with what we're saying or what we're
Right.
not saying? Does it have anything to do with the presentation?
Right. That's, man. Listen, B Wash, man. You got busy, my friend. You definitely got busy. This is an amazing. Thank you for the hours of study that it must have taken you to get all this information and to be able to do this kind of presentation, man. I feel like this is definitely going to be a great teaching aid for the body, and and not that Christianity had to be African, but to know that our ancestors, when they saw the gospel, they willfully embraced it because they saw how amazing it was, and that they themselves were evangelistic and spread the gospel to other Africans.
Exactly.
Just to see that's such a beautiful thing to see that. So it's not the enslaver's religion. It's not the white man's religion. It's for all, right? And thank you for sharing how it spread in this part of the world. So
Awesome. And BK, I want to lead with this. Now with this information out, I think it's important for not only UA, but the Black church and the indigenous churches in America, is that we can begin to, with this whole deconstruction movement, you always have to have an accurate reconstruction. And
right.
so now we can construct based off of truth and say, hey, look, we can look back further and to see what were some of our ancestors doing at that time. And now we can have the challenge for us now to say, okay, so what does that look now moving forward? Now we can have it doesn't change what's happened here in the Americas, but now we can look forward and look back at Sankofa. You look back to look forward, you can see, okay, this was going on. Maybe I can reach further back to see what were the North Africans like, what were the Coptics and the
Right.
Nubians and the Ethiopians like, and then also my West African ancestors. We can carry that legacy with us today. And then what does that look like for us moving forward? If we're going to deconstruct certain things, we need to reconstruct accurately with orthodoxy,
Yep.
in moving forward. So
These are facts. So again, thank you so much, B Wash, for putting in that work and presenting and dismantling some tired critiques when it comes to Christians and Christianity. And
yes.
with that, Byron Washington and BK signing off. Peace.